Okay, moving on to the next team in the ACC that we will be going over, and that is the team that I have projected to finish in 10th place in the ACC, and that would be Brad Brownell and his Clemson Tigers. And I do think it's going to be a very interesting year for Clemson because last year it was one of the better Clemson teams I've seen in a while, and usually I have not been a big Brad Brownell guy since he's been the head coach of Clemson. But last year, it was one of their better teams in a while, one of their better teams since that team a couple of years ago that actually made the Sweet 16. And kind of similar to Georgia Tech, the rare thing about this Clemson team is that they have a bunch of really good players returning that already have an established role. And when you're a program like Clemson, who, let's be honest, historically hasn't been great in basketball, how many years have they had a couple guys return from a team that averaged double digits the previous season? I think that is a really good sign for this Clemson team, and it all starts with Amir Sims, the 6'9 senior. He's been one of the better players in this Clemson basketball program over the last couple of years. He averaged 13 points per game, 7.2 rebounds per game, 2.6 assists per game, and 1 steal per game last year. I really love the way he's able to lead his team. He's very versatile, good size. He could shoot, and you could play him as a 5. So I really like the way Brad Brownell and Clemson uses him. I think he's kind of similar to Michael DeVoe, one of the better players in the ACC. They also bring back Amir Dawes, who was one of their starting guards last year, the 6'2 sophomore. He averaged 9 points per game, 3 rebounds per game, and 2.5 assists per game last year for the Tigers. And John Newman, a guy that last year, to be honest, not a lot of Clemson fans really expected him to break out and have the season that he did. But I remember watching Clemson play Miami in the ACC tournament last year, the day before the season just shut down, and John Newman averaged 9.5 points per game, about 4 rebounds per game, 2.2 assists per game, and I think he was one of the many reasons why last year's Clemson team was one of their better ones in a while. Clemson also brings back Clyde Trapp, the 6'4 senior. He averaged 6.4 points per game, 3.9 rebounds per game, and 2.5 assists per game. Also, they bring in a grad transfer from Fordham, Nick Honor, the 5'10 redshirt sophomore who averaged 15.3 points per game last year, 2.4 rebounds per game, and 3 assists per game for the Fordham Rams last year. I'm curious to see him coming up from the A-10, especially playing at a team like Fordham, who, let's face it, I know technically they are in the Atlantic 10, but let's be real, Fordham is not an Atlantic 10 team. They're a mid-major team. That team hasn't been good in basketball in many years. So I'm curious to see, could those numbers really, really just somehow, some way stay consistent? They also bring back Alex Hemingway, the 6'3 sophomore. He only averaged about 4.8 points per game, about a rebound per game, and about half an assist per game. I think in order for this Clemson team to really hit their ceiling, he is going to need to be a guy that improves and really develops into a larger role on the bench. Also, Hunter Tyson, the 6'8 junior, he was pretty good last year, and I think right now, Clemson, if you're projecting their starting lineup, he would be a guy that I would have projected to start and play some, pretty quality minutes for this Tiger squad, just because I think last year he was another guy that played big-time minutes, and with the injury to Clyde Trapp, Clemson was really able to establish that group of, 5 to 7 players that I think really were able to help their team chemistry. I think if you look at their team this year, if they play a lineup of Honor, Amir Dawes, Newman, and then either Hunter or Trapp at the 4, depending on really where they are and who's ready, and if Clyde Trapp is going to be ready to come back off the injury, plus Amir Sims at the 5. And then also you have a Tyson who you could play. You have a Hemingway who you could play. You have a Jonathan Bayard who you could play. Also, you have Olivier Maxon Prosper, the 6'8 freshman who he's very unproven, but I've heard some pretty good things on him, that he's pretty athletic, and I think he could be a guy that, if he gets into this rotation for the Tigers, could be an impact player. And they bring in P.J. Hall, the 6'10 freshman who is very athletic, and I think he could be a guy that, playing for this Clemson team, could find a way onto the floor. But Amir Sims, the kid is an absolute stud. I think he's one of the more underrated players in all of college basketball. He's very versatile, and he's very skilled with the ball in his hands, which allowed Brad Brownell to play through him last year. And it was interesting because they would do it in the post or as a roll man in pick and roll situations, despite often matching up against opposing centers. I think it was very cool how Amir Sims found ways to score inside, and his perimeter shooting, which was 40%, really was able to open up defenses, particularly as a pick and roll pop guy against drop coverage. And they also bring back some other guys in that front court that I wanted to talk about a little more specifically. PJ Hall they bring in, Lynn Kidd, Olivier Maxence Prosper, and UNC Asheville transfer Jonathan Bayar, who missed almost all of last season with a torn ACL. Hall, he's a borderline top 50 recruit. He could be a difference maker. His size and skill allow him to be interchangeable with Amir Sims, and although he's not a great athlete, I do think he's going to be able to help on the glass and alter shots at the rim. Bayar was very versatile at UNC Asheville, but he's a question mark coming off the injury. And then you will get the returning guys they bring in from last year's squad. All of them shot the ball a decent amount. Alamir Dawes, 31.8% from 3. John Newman, 30% from 3. And then they're going to need Trapp to be a little better. He shot it from 26. And then Hunter Tyson, 32. Also, Tevin Mack and Corinne Scott, two shooters that were very effective for this Clemson team last year. They actually both graduated, which I think is going to be more impactful of an effective role for Alex Hemingway, which I think also is really going to benefit the team's spacing. And I think the last key for the offense is more efficient play from the point guard spot. They bring in Alamir Dawes, they bring back Alamir Dawes, who once again, he was very good last year, but I'm curious to see what this kid Nick Honor could do and if he proves ready to take control of the offense. He was very impressive in his first year playing at Fordham in the A-10, and he sits out for a year. I think him playing in the ACC should be very interesting. And with so many injuries hitting the team last year, Brad Brownell enters the year with a lot of depth compared to your usual Clemson team. And as there are many guys that deserve playing time, I'm curious to see if a coach like Brad Brownell, who, to be honest, he's not one of my favorite coaches in the country, and even in the ACC, there are a lot other coaches I trust a little bit more with their teams than Brad Brownell of Clemson. But at the same time, I do think that last year they did show some optimism, including winning at UNC for the first time ever. And with Amir Sims, with Alamir Dawes back, maybe there is some potential for this Clemson team. And yeah, with that being said, I have them finishing in 10th.